Okay, we're starting Be'ez Hashem Sim and Kuf Lamed Hey, and now we're shifting to a new subject, and this is the subject of the Averis of the Medina. And this Simon is going to discuss two different Averis, Gilui Arayis and Shvichas Damim. Two big Averis. So take a look. V'noida lamiskav. It's well known ki hema miyusadim gam al sharhu Averis kulam. That the Medina is not just that the Medina is not allowed to exist, like we've been saying up till now, but the Medina is founded on other Averis in the Torah, all the other Averis, shehem bi yaharg v'al yavor, all the Averis that are yaharg v'al yavor. And what are they? Avodah Zarah, we've been talking about till now, Kfira, but now we're talking about the other two. Gilui Arayis or Shvichas Damim. Ukvar nidfas migdoilei Eretz Yisrael al giyas habanas. It's already been printed, the Isser that the Gedolim of Eretz Yisrael, I think the Chazanish, on the drafting of girls into the Israeli army that happened in the 1950s. There were protests against it, and the Chazanish was the leader of those who said that it's Yaharg Val Yavor for a girl to be drafted.
Even if they were a goyim drafting women to the army, it's Shat Hashmad, the women will have to give up their lives rather than do it.
Okay, so
Moshe does say this.
Okay, shehu biyaharg v'al bishvil shiro bazeh shehu gilui arayis, because they understood the reason why it's yaharg v'al is because going to the army for a girl is gilui arayis. Now take a look. I wasn't able to find the original poster with the signatures of the Chazanish and other people, but I have here on page 9 another kind of poster that came out in the 70s. It says Giyus Banis Yaharg v'al Lo'er ha'matzav she'oimdim la'asoi pshara b'choit giyus habanas she'kol nara v'nara afilu nashim nesuai siyu mechuyavis t'sharis tatzava. That in the matzav that was in current then in the 70s, they were planning to make a law that every woman has to go to the Israeli army. Chutz minashim shomer Shabbos v'kashrus. Interesting that the law would have excluded religious Jews, right? Shazehu, but still, this psak comes out against it. Shazehu benigud l'psak din shel kol gedolei haTorah shepasku shegiyus l'tzava hu begeder yaharg v'al yavor. So it's saying basically it doesn't matter if you keep Shabbos or not, if you keep kashrus or not, you can't go to the army. It's yaharg v'al yavor. Ve'ein al zeh dina de malchus dina. It's interesting. They're saying even if you're a Zionist and you believe in Dina Malchus Dina being applicable there,
and even if a guy should go more to do it, that we would have to give up their life rather than go to the army, as Moshe says.
Even the national service that they did instead of the army was also included in this. Let's take a look. It doesn't have any actual signatures on it, but it's sort of a reiteration of the original psak. Back to vayoel moshe. Aval. And turn the page now. Heim einam shoymim b'kol moirim. That the Zionists, of course, don't listen to the poskim, and umemalim es hagiyus shalahem ba'arayis rachmana litzlan. They fill up their giyus, their army, with the aveira of arayis. V'af b'milchemes mitzvah shehu b'braisa b'maseches soita. Even though now the Zionists come up with an argument, they say, look, the Mishnah in Saita says, the end of the parak Meshuach Milchama, the 8th parak of Saita, it says that by a Melchemes mitzvah, everyone has to go, even a chasim echedrai v'kala mechupasa. This whole parsha in the Torah and Shoftim that says that mi.
But we never read towards. Wait a second. Mi hoish asher eiras isha, who just got married, should go back to his house and not die in the war. And then it also says that if a person marries a wife for the first year, he's patur from going to the war. So that's all said by a Melchemes Reshus. Oh, but Melchemes Mitzvah, so it says that afilu chasen has to go out to the war, afilu kala, even the kala goes out from the chuppah. Uva Rambam Perak Zayin Mehilchas Malachim, the Rambam brings it down, Perak Zayin, Shakol Yoitzim afilu chasen mechedrei v'kala mechupasa. So the Zionists say, oh, you see, you're allowed to draft girls. So Zakter, no. Kasav Shamar Radvaz, the Radvaz, the Mefarish on the side of the Rambam says, Bebiur el Rambam she'ena nashim yoitzis b'milchama. He says no. It doesn't mean literally that the girls go to war. El b'masha amar kal mechupasa hachi kamar. Kivin shechasin yoitzis mechedrai kal yoitzis mechupasa. It just means that once the chasin leaves and he doesn't go to his chas in the room, so the kala doesn't go to her chuppah either. They cancel the wedding because let's say they're about to have a wedding and all of a sudden there's a war. It's fine, the chassan goes out to the war and the kala goes out of the chuppah. Doesn't mean that she goes to war. She just doesn't go through with the chuppah and the 7 days of the mishnah.
The efsher.
It's from after the chuppah, but
it could mean afterwards also. Yeah, you could touch it either way. The efsher de v'milchemes mitzvah hanashim hayu misapkois mayim wasn't the ba'aleim. And the Ritvav says the second shot that it could be that they did go out, but they didn't go out to fight. They went out to just supply the army with food.
Even during World War II, although women weren't drafted to the army in America, they were forced to go to factories,
right,
to start, clothes process.
To make.
Although women aren't drafted, women still were during World War II forced to go to factories.
Ad kan l'shoyna. Ve'apirish harishan shekasav. This first shot that the Ritvav says that they didn't actually go anywhere; they just left the chuppah. So he says, "Nira lafi ani istaiti meduktach b'lashon." I think that we can be medayik this in the lashon of Chazal. Why does the memra of Chazal, why is it split into two? Goes to Chassan, goes out of his room, and the Kal goes out of the chuppah. Why doesn't it include them both in one expression? The Chassan and Kal leave their room. The Chassan and Kal make pasam. The Chassan and Kal go out of their chuppah. But Kivin Shehu and Yinechad, since it's one inyan. Must be like the first shot in the Ritvav, but it doesn't mean that they both go out to war. But it means that the Chassan goes to the war, she just goes out of her chuppah, but she doesn't go out of her room. She goes back home, she goes to her room, and she stays there until the war's over. And what's the chiddush? What does it have to say, this thing about the kala? Even though the fact that the chassan is going to the war is going to cause that mispatel yemei chuppah, it's going to cause that the shivas yemei mishte will become batel shalakala. So it's a right. He's talking about after the chuppah, right? He's saying that it's going to be batel the shivas yemei mishte, right? Because otherwise he could just get married later. But even though you're in the middle of the 7 days of the Shavuot brachos and the chassan is going to leave and the kala will have to leave, ein mashkichin bozeh, doesn't matter. Okay. Even according to the second shot in the Ritvav, that they're supplying their husbands with food, it just means they're going to supply their own husbands. Just to come among all the men, especially if they have to carry a weapon, there's no heter for a woman to do that. Even by an obligatory milchama.
I just want to just say, if the Zionists already want to draft women, you know what it shows me? In what danger they're really in. Because in the Soviet Union, when the Nazis, invade the Soviet Union and were causing havoc, eventually they drafted women and children to the army.
They did.
Of course, they drove the Nazis out, but they had to draft women and children.
Out of despeраcy. So
right.
Shows how desperate.
The Nazis killed 25 million people in 2 years in the Soviet Union.
Wow.
Because they said, so to me, it shows how desperate Zionists really are. If they're so desperate, they're even drafting women.
The Russians were doing it because they needed it. The Zionists are doing it because they wanted.
But he's saying the Zionists.
I think because they're desperate. That's why.
Change.
Okay, yeah. There's two ways to look at it. Right.
For what?
To beat the Arabs.
I don't think so. I think they're doing it to ruin the people. I mean, to.
But
the army is used as a melting pot.
You're right, but still, no, you can they're desperate because.
So now we're getting into the second isser of a lady going to war, which has to do with the isser of wearing lo yakli gever al isha,
which is arayos, and it's forbidden.
Wearing weapons on an isha is considered lo yakli gever al isha. So this is what he's about to bring now. The cost of her Rabbi Abraham ben Ezra, the Ibn Ezra, Parashas Tetzei, ala cost of lo yakli gever al isha. That why was this pasuk written here in Parashat Kiseitze? Because Parashat Kiseitze starts out Kiseitze l'milchama aledecha. So he says ba'avur tzeis l'milchama v'chulu. We'll see in a minute what the v'chulu is. Im hi teitze imu anashim. If she goes out among men l'milchama tavoi baderech lidei znus, that she'll come to be mizana with them. That's the derech that Hashem knew already, that when people are at war, they have a yetzer hara for a rise. That's why the whole parasha was said there. It says yifas toyar. There's a heter of yifas toyar because dibra toyar can get yetzer hara. So obviously there's yetzer hara. If they're going to be ladies in the army, this is what's going to happen.
Just to add on to that shvichus damim, is shaykh to gilui arag. You can see they're both in the same category. So if you're going to be violent, that's going to actually lead to arayos. So usually violence leads to arayos.
Turn to page 6 in the sheets. I have the Ibn Ezra here.
A moment. Because yes, shvichus damim and giras are very much connected.
Lo yakli gever nismecha ba'avur tzeis l'machama ki ha'isha lo nivreis ki im lahakim azera. that the Isha was created in order to have children. So there's a Yetzer. That's why he's explaining why there's a Yetzer Hara. That's why Hashem created the Yetzer Hara in the first place, that the women should have children. He takes a ima nashim l'milchama. If she's going to be in the war with the men, tava b'derech lidei znus. Okay, so he's explained that's the pshat in lo yeh kli gever. That's really the main focus. Lo yeh kli gever. Of course, it also covers wearing a suit and a tie. But the main reason nowadays, the main reason why, and pants. But the main reason why the Torah gave the Isser lo yeh kli gever is because the Torah doesn't want a lady going to war and having a rifle. Back to vayoel moshe. V'giris kazeh. This kind of drafting of girls who gam sakana atzum l'klal Yisrael. That besides being in a veir of Gilui Arayis, it's causing a sakana to the Jewish people. Kasher hey dakasiv, because the Torah says, Ki yire b'cha ervas davar v'shav mi'acharecha. That by a Muhammad, if there's anything that's wrong there, anything that's an Aveira, even a person who has an Aveira, he doesn't toivel himself there, the pasuk in Kisei say, Hashem will see ervas davar v'shav mi'acharecha. He'll stop helping your army. You can't be menatzeach in a war. You can't win a war mitzad kedusha with Hashem's help. If Hashem's shechina is taken away from there. The only way to win the war would be the way that the rebbe held that the Israelis won their war, which is through the Sitra Achra. That the Satan is given a tremendous power to help the Sionim in order to convince people to follow them, to bring them into a Nisayin. But this kind of a victory is only temporary. As we see that today, that the Israelis, after all their victories, they're not living a good life there. They're not succeeding in peace. Uvehashar, for the rest of time, in other words, this victory will be temporary. You'll get, 67, you'll win, you'll get all the territories, but in the end, you'll have to have Rahmanas from Hashem in order to stay alive. So you'll never really get anywhere with these victories from the Sitra Achra. So therefore, to have girls in the army, to have Gilui Arayis is a big sakana. Okay, Gam Roiv Kibbutzehem, most of the kibbutzim, besides the army, but just look at the kibbutzim of the Zionists, Hema B'Yerbuvia Shel Gilui Arayis, Mamish, that they're run based on a shita of Gilui Arayis. They don't have real marriages there, and they don't raise the kids as separately boys and girls. They make them davka not. They make them try to whatever, they try to take out the right, and they try to raise them without any understanding of what it means to be tzniistic and what it means to be a girl.
Just to add on to this,
children are raised away from their parents, by the way, in the kibbutzim. Wow. They don't even let them see their parents except once a week.
Even today, I think
it's changing today.
But they give up on everything.
Last week's part, I just want to say
the kam chukim beknesses. Many laws that were passed by the Israeli Knesset, shehem Gilui Arayis mamish, that these laws are real Gilui Arayis. The aim laharich was that, but we can't go on at length to detail them all. Ki yadua shekol asifoisehem, all the gatherings of the Tzionim, upuloisehem, all their actions, hema b'taruvois meguna. They're all done with a mixture of men and women. Ve'al yodam malah ha'aretz zima, and because of that, the land Eretz Yisrael is full of zima, full of znus, rachmana litzlan. Now, just to talk about Giyas Barnas a little bit more, I brought down some more Marmakoimis here. Take a look quickly, page 7. This is the Mishnah in Soita. The Rebbe only brought the Radvaz, so I looked around to see if the Tzionim have anything to stand on with Giyas Barnas. So take a look, the Mishnah in Soita, Tiferes Yisrael on the Mishnah, Kala Mechupasa, the last words in the Mishnah there. Kala Mechupasa, he says, Isha lav bas milchama. It doesn't really mean that the Isha goes to milchama. Rak l'stapik mazon, only to supply food to the soldiers, or l'sakin adrachim, or to prepare the roads. Afi says, for that she goes out. So it's similar to the Radvaz's second shot. Okay.
Wait, so did Kasher say anything against this, or?
So we're going to look in a second. I looked around. I tried to find Kasher is not the one who would talk about this because I don't think he held of Giyas Barnas, but. Take just one more page here. The Rishash on the Mishnayos. The Rishash has the problem also of Kala Michupasa. Mashma de Gam Noshim Yoitzes the Muchama v'chidushu. It's mashma that women fight in the war, and that's a chiddush. V'ulai einam Yoitzes el lavashel v'lefos. He says the same teretz, that they go out to cook and bake and make food for the soul.
Yeah, even like the Romans had it this way. When they do their conquest, even they had with them, to cook for the legions. Even the Romans had this.
Now turn to page 10.
Yeah.
I found this page by Rabbi Shlomo Yosef Zevin, who talks about Giyas Bonus here, and he comes up with some people who were matir it. Take a look. He says like this: Ela HaChinuch, the source to be matir is the Chinuch. The Sefer HaChinuch, b'chol mitzvah sheyesh lam kesher milchama. All wars, all mitzvahs that have to do with wars, the Chinuch ends off with a general statement: who's chayiv, who's potter. So he says, Mesayim tamid v'noy heges mitzvah zu b'scharim. He said the mitzvah only applies to men. Shehem haruyim l'milchama. Milvad b'mitzvah achas, except for one mitzvah, hachrim tachrimim, the mitzvah of the Shiva Amamim. He says shekasav shenoheges b'scharim uven nekeva.
But it's an amma. It's not. The
By the way, it's an interesting thing that by Parshas Zachor, a lot of women go to shul, but the chinuch choyer holds not, because the chinuch says that only men are chayiv in the mitzvah of mecheves amalek. Over here, by the Shiva Amamim, he says neheges b'scharim uven nekevas. So what's the difference between Amalek and the Shiva Amamim? That here he's saying it's neheges b'scharim uven nekevas. So he goes on here and he brings down Rabbi Yoshe Ber Soloveitchik, B'Sefer HaYovel, Mekava the Rav Leventhal. Look down in the second paragraph near the end. He says, Shnei dinim b'melchemes mitzvah yesh adin shel hachrim tachrimim v'imachrei timche shebe'etzem ein shayach klal milchama. That there are two dinim. There's a din milchama, which doesn't apply to women, but there's also a din that has nothing to do with milchama, just a din hachrim tachrimim, to kill them. And that even women are chayvin kemivur b'Rambam v'yesh gam chaloisim v'dinim shel milchama. The whole lamdash shtickle here is v'achinach stoiver shenashim p'turos m'vkaz m'chayvis milchama. They're parted from war. Aval b'negei l'chayvis ha-mitzvah atzma. Then that they're chayvin.
But it's still so.
And that's what it means. Shahakol yoytzim ba'afilu kal mechupasa.
But we were before me. The chal goes out to cook for the men, not to fight.
All right, but so apparently he's learning. He's trying to fit.
Yeah, but he's sneaky.
This J.B. Soloveitchik, he's trying to fit that the Mishnah means.
He's sneaky like kasher.
Kalami chupasa means that they fight in a certain way, not necessarily in a war, but they fight.
He's a clever guy.
Soloveitchik supported the gays.
I don't know historically what he held about gays bonus.
Where is this?
It's a good question.
You know that we supported some?
He says it's in a Sefer HaYovel. It's in like a memorial book, a book that's celebrating the 50th year of Rav Leventhal. Philadelphia Tuf Reish Tadikei. This is 1935. This is a long time ago, before the Medina even existed. So he's not even talking. He's talking in theory, not talking about the Medina. I don't know if J.B. Soloveitchik had any position on Giyas Bonus. Yeah.
But you write in his book that he wouldn't condemn the Satmar Rebbe when he said it's Master Satan, when everybody else was condemning it, right?
Right. So in 1967. He came out with a surprising statement. He said that, the Satmar Rebbe came to America, everybody became more religious,
right,
including myself. So he said, don't be so quick to knock what the Rebbe says about the Tzionim. Kitzer.
He said that's quoted.
That's a quote. Yeah, Rabbi Meisels told me the quote. I don't know if it's printed anywhere until I printed it. But okay.
You printed it where?
It's in the Rebbe book.
Is it in the book?
Yeah.
You mentioned they heard it from Rabbi Meisels?
I think so. Yeah, I think the Makar is written there. Everything I say there has a Makar. Okay. Gam b'shvichus damim yedehem damim moleu. So this is a new sugya now. Gilui Arayis is one thing, but now the Medina has a lot of blood on its hands. Shvichus damim.
Keep fighting more wars.
V'hein hema hasiba la'ashever anoira shel arikas sheishes milyonim Yisrael. They're the cause of the 6 million, as the Rebbe explained in other places. But we're not going to go into that now. And he says, "V'gam me'arz v'yadata," and from then until now, neragu harbe revolvers mi Yisrael. From the Hakamas of Medina until today, until the writing of this sefer, which is 1959, many tens of thousands of Jews were killed because of the Medina. Biglal harayin hatame hazeh, because of this tame idea, shall hakamas Medina becherev uvizroya basar, of establishing a state by force of arms. Terem shigi hazman mi'akodesh baruch hu, before the zman of Hakadosh Baruch Hu comes. The hema mufkarim umafkirim es klal Yisrael. They are hefkerdik people, they don't care, and they put Klal Yisrael in danger ba'avur hageirus v'asrar, because of their own pride, shalahem, that they want to win a war. Kamasha Kasav Ramban beParshas told us. The Ramban says in Parshas told us that this is how Esav thought. He says, "Al Kasav Vayivez Esav es haBechorah." that Esav, the Pasuk Pshat is the Pasuk means that Esav, when he sold the Bechor to Yaakov, he was vayives Esav is a Bechor. But the Ramban learns, no, it's coming to explain the background, that why did Esav sell the Bechor? Because anyway Esav was mevaz the Bechor. Because anyway Esav didn't care about his Bechor. Because what's a Bechor? Bechor means that when the father dies, he gets pishnayim. He gets double portion. So Esav said, I'm not going to outlive my father anyway. Esav knew he had a dangerous occupation, and he's going to die anyway. He'll probably die in his father's lifetime. That a ksil, a rasha, only thinks about now, he doesn't care about later. So therefore Esav didn't care about the Bechor. That's what the Ramban says. That's why Esav sold the Bechor, because he didn't care about it anyway.
Oh, but you just add further that you see Esav openly showed how he hates Bechor another way. Yaakov, said to Esav,
Gam b'kibush Sinai shehisparu boy shahayu nisim. That the Zionists are proud to say that during the Sinai campaign there were nisim. Also biyadam ela masha hoilichu harbe Yisrael miYisrael lahariga. That the only thing they accomplished with the Sinai war was that they killed a lot of Yidden in the war. Lo al pi das torah, not according to the das torah. Ela al pi das minim. That it was minim who decided on the war. And the shafchu damim, and they spilled blood, and they didn't accomplish anything. The nidal delu, not only did a lot of soldiers lose their lives, but also nidal delu chamishim alafim miYisrael toishvei mitzrayim. That 50,000 Egyptian Jews lost their source of a living. The government almost forced them out of the country, but it persecuted them a lot after that. Shahayu yoshim sham shalvim mushketim. That the Egyptian Jews were living there in peace up to that point. Ubeinehem gam gvirim adirim. There were some of them who were very rich. Ad oisa muchama, until that war. Gam harbe rois v'tzaros garmu b'zeh. And also they caused a lot of other dangers to the Jewish people during that war. We're going to talk about in a minute what that was. El shebechemlas Hashem al Yisrael. But with the mercy of Hashem on Klal Yisrael, b'schus Hashem Torah mitzvahs, and with the schus of those people, those Erlich Yidden who fight against Zionism, shaloich mimi matzion v'mesiras nefesh nistabev me'am mistabev kol hasibos. So the cause of all causes, Hashem caused shehuchruchu lahafsik hamilchama, that they were forced to back off from what they conquered. V'liso gachar mikol mashalakhu. The Eisenhower got involved, and he told them, if you don't go back, then we're going to kick you out of the UN. We're going to see in a minute what that means. And because of that, the whole danger calmed down, and the whole danger from the Russians, that's what he really means, and I'm going to see in a second, that disappeared. If the Zionists would have accomplished what they wanted, they would have kept Sinai, and they would have gone further into Egypt and taken the Suez Canal, it would be a sakana not just for their army, but for all the Yidden in Eretz Yisrael, from the Soviets. That they said themselves, that there were nisim for all the Yidden in Eretz Yisrael that time, because the threat of nuclear destruction was averted. So therefore, let's see, if there was really a nes, that the shiurim say, yeah, there was a nes and we were saved, so let's see, who brought them into this sakana that they needed a nes. They didn't rely on a nes. First of all, if they believe in Hashem, they believe in nisim, they know that the Torah says you're not allowed to be soymech on a nes.
You know what Chazal tells us on this.
And if you just let me finish, and if you don't believe in nisim, then you for sure can't be soymech on a nes. So, ma'avshach, whether you believe in it or you don't believe in it, you're not being soymech on a nes.
Just add on to this, that the Pelio just says on this, that whoever relies on a miracle in danger should learn from the big tzaddikim. Moshe Rabbeinu fled, David Melech fled, Eliyahu Navi fled. So you see, even Moshe was the greatest who ever lived, who ran away from Pharaoh and never came back to Mitzrayim until he told him to come back.
And even by a mitzvah it says, Heicha de Shchia Chazeka Shani. You can't be
Moshe was arguing with Hashem because Moshe was sure he still can't put his life in danger when going back to Mitzrayim, because he still know Pharaoh going to want to kill him when he comes back.
So therefore, those who believe in nisim, they know that we don't rely on nisim. Especially if it's not just your own danger, but it's a danger to the whole Jewish people. So therefore, anyone who brings them into such a war shall sakanas nefashos b'li das Torah hu roitzeach. Anyone who brings them into a war is like a murderer. So Ben Gurion and Dayan and all the people who started that war, they were all murderers. So that's if they would believe in Nisim. But even if you don't, but here they don't believe in Nisim at all. So they for sure not being Soymach on Nisim.
They believe in them.
So what did they rely upon then? Why did they go into the war? They relied on the fact that they were in an alliance, that they had an alliance with England and France. That was the Suez-Sinai War. That they had a plan together with England and France to invade, that the Israelis would invade the canal, and then the British and the French would come in and separate the combatants, and they would take the canal away from Nasser. That was the whole purpose there. So, Shehem Mekusharim min Malchei Adirim, B'tziruf Charbam Uzroim, with the combination of their own power, Neged Ho'araviyim Machalashim, against the Arabs who were weak. Even though they knew the Arabs were taka weak, but the enemies, the Russians who were supporting the Arabs, they were taka the powerful, one of the most powerful countries in the world. But the way of these Zionists who don't care about these things is lahachnis hakol b'sakanas tatzumos. They bring the Jews into great sakana avur safik nitzuach shall cover the sorah, just because they might get some type of victory and get some covet out of it. Ugadula sha'asamach mem miyatzam, that the samach mem gives them this aid to do. Kasher vesi ke'ein zeh me'aramban. As he just brought, the Ramban says that Esav's whole thing was for now, for his whole pleasure of right now. But however, the reason why the Jews were saved during the Sinai War was it was a chesed from Hashem. They had to stop the war and to go back mikol v'chol, and completely from everything that they conquered. That in the last few days of the war, that the war was going on, the enemies thought, the Russians decided, they decided not to physically go into a war. That they'll be yotze by giving a warning without actually going into a fight. That was the nes that happened. That was the attack that took place. That was the reason why the rest of the Yidden in Eretz Yisrael were saved. Okay? But the Samach Mem convinced people that there was really a nes that happened, to the war of the Minim, in order to convince people to follow them, to get people to follow the Minim. I'll just finish up the sim and then we'll look at the history. So the Rebbe says he borrows the lashon from.
Besides, you don't even know where Sinai even is.
He borrows the lashon from Yaakov Avinu. Esav said, "Hachi kara shmo Yaakov." Is he called Yaakov? Means he's taka called Yaakov for a good reason, not the reason that you thought, but rather for the reason that I'm saying now. Vayakveni zeh pamayim. So here the Rebbe says a similar word, that they think it's called Kibbutz Sinai because they were conquering the Sinai desert, but he says no. They didn't conquer anything. That's what they're really conquering. The Zionists are conquering what was given at Sinai, which is the Torah. We don't even
know where Sinai even is. The Torah gave us no location. You know, I just want to say, all these maps that people make of where Jews were, they're not accurate. We weren't told where they even are. Or feed them where these places. Exactly. And because these religious Jews support the Zionists and they say, there were Nisim and everything, that's why these Mufkarim, these Hefkerdika people, are given power over the Jews. And they put all Jewish lives in danger, physical and spiritual danger, to great sakanas. Okay, now so turn to 11. This is Benny Morris's book, Righteous Victims. Hey, you want to recommend this book to me, right? That it's a very good book about.
It's very fair, yeah.
He writes a lot of things for about Israel 1940.
Middle of the road book. It doesn't take sides. So he says the IDF lost about 190 soldiers killed. He's talking about the Sinai war. He says in that war, 190 soldiers were killed, 20 captured, and 800 injured in the Sinai campaign. And what for? For nothing. They went in, they went out, didn't get anything for it. The Egyptian army lost several thousand killed and much of its equipment. Some 4,000 Egyptians fell into Israeli hands. Okay. Then later on, he brings over here on the other side, on November 5th, both Israel and Egypt had accepted the UN demand for a ceasefire, substantially undercutting the Anglo-French invasion even before it had begun. The following day, Soviet Prime Minister Nikolai Bulganin sent Eden, Molay, Ben-Gurion, and Eisenhower threatening messages. The letter to Israel was particularly menacing. Israel's attack on Egypt was sowing a hatred for the state of Israel among the peoples of the East, such as cannot but make itself felt with regard to the future of Israel, and which puts in jeopardy the very existence of Israel as a state. Basically, he's threatening that if they don't stop the invasion, he's going to mix in, and the Russians, of course, had nuclear weapons at that time. And if you turn the page again...
I think he's called the New Historians, right?
Yeah, if you turn the page again, even one day after that, Ben-Gurion still didn't back down. And he said on November 7th, Ben-Gurion declared, this is the famous victory speech that Ben-Gurion made. He said, the 1949 armistice agreement with Egypt was dead, and that Israel would permit no UN force to be stationed in its territory. That's what the world was asking. America and Russia were asking them to back down and say, we'll put a UN force in the Sinai Peninsula. And Ben-Gurion said, no, we don't allow any UN force there, in any part of the Sinai and the Gaza Strip that it occupied. A few hours later, the UN General Assembly passed a resolution calling for the immediate withdrawal of 3 invading armies from Egypt's soil. The vote was 65-1.
Did the Zionists believe the Sinai desert was in Egypt?
What'd you say?
The Zionists believe the Sinai desert is in Egypt?
They believe that what?
That the Sinai desert is in Egypt?
So because they're 65-1, right? 65 nations against one state of Israel voted that they should get out of the soil. Herbert Hoover Jr., acting U.S. Secretary of State, threatened that his government would cut off all public and private aid to Israel, there would be UN sanctions, and Israel would be expelled from the organization, expelled from the UN. And President Eisenhower had just been elected to a second term. He could allow himself to ignore Jewish lobbying. And so basically they had to back down. And turn the page, I have another book here this is by O'Brien. It's called The Siege, History of Israel. Pretty.
What was the first English writer?
The first one was Righteous Victims by Benny Morris.
What was his writer's full name?
Connor
Cruz O'Brien, yeah.
But why not mention it?
He's a Irish delegate to the UN who witnessed all these things, and he wrote a book about basically the whole history of the Medina.
Quotes.
Yeah, he's the siege. He's a pro-Israel guy, but he brings this down just to show how dangerous things were in 1956. He says, Premier Bulganin was brandishing the Soviet Union's newly acquired missiles. On November 5th, he sent Israel a note saying that Israel's actions places in question the very existence of Israel as a state. That was the one that Benny Morris quoted. Then he says like this: on November 6th in Paris, the U.S. ambassador informed Premier Guy Mollet that a threatened Soviet attack on Britain and France would lead to U.S. retaliation. You hear? He said that if the U.S. if the Soviet Union attacks Britain and France, then the U.S. will mix in and they'll attack in retaliation, but not Israel. He says the conspicuous omission of Israel, according to Michael Becher, was not unknown to her decision makers. On November 7th, the CIA leaked a report attributed to U.S. Ambassador Bolin in Moscow that the Kremlin intended to flatten Israel on the following day. So this is what would have happened if they would have kept on with holding on to Sinai. And then O'Brien speculates that if Stalin would have been alive at that time, then he would have really done it.
What was this working? What was Sinai for?
It's 1956.
Yeah.
Okay, now one more page. Just look at the next thing. It says he says that Herbert Hoover Jr., Under Secretary of State, said that Israel's attitude will lead to the most severe measures, serious measures such as the termination of all U.S. governmental and private aid, United Nations sanctions, and eventual expulsion from the UN. Hoover also warned that if Israel's non-withdrawal led to Soviet penetration of the Middle East, Israel would be the first to be swallowed up. So basically, the United States distanced itself from the Zionim, and the Soviet Union threatened them, and that was the danger that the Rebbe is talking about in this whole simon when he says that the Zionim, Ho'imnim b'tzad Ho'arvim, they almost wiped out the Yidden in Eretz Yisrael. The chesed was that they decided not to do that. They decided just to leave it at threats and nothing more than that. And that was the nace that the Tzionim painted as a whole nace that they were Zoicha to, when in reality they were the ones who brought the Yidden in the Sakana to begin with.